And welcome back to the last part of this MSCA Doctoral Networks 23 call information event. So we are now starting the question and answer session, and you can still submit few last questions if you want through Slido using the QR code appearing on the screen or the code DN 2023. Just to inform you that if in case we don't have enough time to go through all your questions, where you will get some written answers to those questions that we cannot take live. Otherwise, we'll try to answer to as many questions as possible. So for this question and answer session, I will have my colleagues with me who will also help me answer your questions. So Julien, Eleni, and Michaela. Then let's start with the first question, and let's see in Slido. So you can also vote for the questions that you would like to be answered first. And the first one is about the call documents, which states that the letters of commitment are not applicable to the 23 call anymore, as also mentioned at the end of Julien's presentation. A welcome change, but how does it work now? How do we prove the commitment of a partner organization to our training program? So for this one, Julien, do you want to give the answer?
Sure, Audrey. So yes, indeed, letters of commitment are not applicable for associated partners in 2023 anymore. So how do you prove their commitment? You don't need to prove their commitment any longer, the same way you don't have to prove the commitment of the beneficiaries. But of course, you have to insert the associated partners, all the associated partners in the part A of the proposal. You have to explain in the part B of the proposal what it is that these associated partners will do in the network. And that's about it, basically. We take your word for it.
Yes, indeed, this is a huge simplification for you as an applicant. Just to complement maybe that when you insert your associated partners in the part A in the system, you will need to use a code of identification. And this is also part of the commitment, since when you add the associated partner, normally they will also receive a notification that they are involved in this proposal. So as a coordinator, when you prepare a proposal, you should make sure that all the participants involved in your proposal are aware of it, since you will self-declare that everyone involved in the proposal is aware and agree to be involved in the proposal. So let's go now to the next question. And the next question is about UK. So how do the UK partners have to be considered for the DN23 call? Can they be beneficiaries or associated partners? And for this one, who would like to take this question? Michaela?
Okay, yeah. So for this call, UK partners can be considered as beneficiaries from an associated country. And this is subject, of course, subject, of course, to the entry into force of the association agreement until the signature of the grant agreement. Sorry, a bit of I mixed up my words. So what will happen is during the evaluation, UK partners will be considered as beneficiaries. If the proposal is successful and it is actually proposed for funding, we will open the grant agreement preparations. And if the association agreement is signed by them, we will sign with them. Otherwise, we will take measures which we will inform you in due time.
Thank you. So UK participants can be either beneficiary or associated partner within the DN23 call. This is a good news for those potential applicants. Another question about country participation, it seems. So what is the situation of Switzerland participation? I'm looking at my colleagues who would like to take this question. Julien?
Sure, I can take that one. So contrary to the UK, which is in the process of being associated to Horizon Europe, Switzerland is not. So basically, the Swiss participants, they are not. Switzerland is not an associated country to Horizon Europe, so they can participate as associated partners. Of course, they could also participate as a beneficiary, but you need to know that their funding can only be exceptionally granted, and that will be up to the evaluators if they assess that the participation of this Swiss entity is absolutely essential for the implementation of the project. And by essential, most of the time it's, for instance, when the entity has access to a specific database, for instance, that nobody else has access to. This could be a reason, for instance. So concerning Switzerland, you have to think that they are as if it was a US entity, for instance. So it's a high-income third country. Obviously, Switzerland is a high-income country. So they can participate as associated partner all the time, of course. Anyone can participate as associated partner. But as beneficiary, their participation, their funding can only be exceptionally granted.
Yes, as Eleni, you mentioned, yes, indeed. So now we have a few cases now with Switzerland or UK for the DN21 call, for example, where as associated partners, they could also have their own doctoral fellows, but recruited with their own funds. So this is also a bit specific, but thank you, Julien, for this answer. And let's move on to the next question, which is about joint doctorates. So is it possible to plan some doctoral candidates with 36 months fellowship duration and some doctoral candidates with 48 months within the total of 540 person months? So for this one, Eleni?
It is a very simple and short answer. Yes, it is possible. You can, as long as you respect the total limit of 540 person months in total. Yes, you can.
Thank you very much, Eleni. Just maybe to complement, so the idea is indeed not to give 48 months to all fellows in a joint doctorate if they don't need it. In some countries, the PhD might be shorter, in some others it might be longer, so you have the flexibility to have a mix of those duration within the same joint doctorates. So now the next question in Slido is about if we are a research organization not able to deliver a PhD degree, can we participate as beneficiary in a standard doctoral network? So who would like to take this question? Michaela?
Yeah, okay. So if you're a research organization not able to deliver a PhD degree, you can indeed participate as a beneficiary in a standard DN as long as you recruit a doctoral candidate. But as the rule is that this doctoral candidate needs to be enrolled in a PhD in a member state or associated country, you will need to actually find another beneficiary or another associated partner to enroll the fellow in a PhD degree. So this is the answer.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. So let's move on to the next question. Are joint doctorates needed or preferred for the normal doctoral networks? So maybe I can shortly reply to this one. So of course, in standard doctoral networks, the PhD enrollment is mandatory for all doctoral candidates, but we don't have any preferences about the joint or industrial doctorates. Of course, you can do it and you can include some fellows with a joint doctoral program or an industrial doctoral program, but it's not mandatory. And in standard doctoral networks, what is important and mandatory is the enrollment of all doctoral candidates in a PhD program located in one member state or associated country. So let's move on to the next question, which is about the budget for the call. So how is it distributed between the three types of doctoral networks? In particular, is there an advantage of submitting an industrial network over a normal doctoral network? I think Julien already partially replied to your question during the presentation in the last session, but maybe you would like to give some more information. Julien?
Sure. So basically, indeed, there is no budget breakdown between the three different modalities. So within the scientific panel in which you submitted your proposal, all the three modes compete within each other. So basically, it's just simply the best proposals of a given panel will get the funding, and there is no particular advantage in submitting one mode or the other. Basically, all modes are possible within a panel, and there is no budget specifically for any given mode.
Thank you, Julien. And let's move on to the next question. So I see a lot of interest in joint doctorates. This is very good, since we also told you that we would like to see more of them, also for the objective to have a better structuring effect for all participating organizations. So this one is about the possibility to plan a total of 12 doctoral candidates with a fellowship duration of 45 months within the total of 540 person months. So who would like to take this question? Eleni? Yeah?
The answer is very simple and short, and it is yes. You can, in fact, plan for a total of 12 doctoral candidates with a fellowship duration of 45 months. You just need to respect the limit of the total 540 person months for the whole project, for the whole doctorate. And other than that, you can, of course, do it. Remember that in the case of joint doctorates, you do have to submit a letter of pre-agreement, a letter of pre-agreement by the PhD awarding institutions. There is a template which is included in the funding and tender portals, and you can download it from there, you can use it, sign it. Remember, you have to submit it.
And just maybe also to link this question. So in terms of there's no specific recipe of the number of months that you should give to the doctoral candidates within joint doctorates. It's also linked to the duration of the PhD in your own countries. It should be linked also to the overall research project, so if it makes sense, and this will be also assessed by the evaluators during the evaluation. So let's move to the next question about UK partners. So can they be coordinators of an MSCA Doctoral Network? And I'm looking at Michaela, maybe she's our expert in UK participation today.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. So since actually UK partners will be considered as beneficiaries, then can of course be also the coordinators of MSCA ATN proposal.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. So another question in Slido. Can a PhD candidate be enrolled in a university in a different country within EU to the country hosting the student? So, yes, who would like to take this question?
I could take this if you want, Audrey. So the simple answer is yes. Obviously, I mean, some institutions that are not delivering doctoral degrees as beneficiaries, I mean, they have to enroll their fellow in a different institution for the PhD enrollment. So it could be in another beneficiary from the consortium, or an associated partner within the consortium, or an associated partner linked to them. This is absolutely possible. Could be in a different country. Now, of course, you have to assess whether this is practical for the fellow to be enrolled in a doctoral degree in a different country. So maybe if the fellow, I mean, if the doctoral degree needs some, time within the university for, I don't know, some sorts of training, maybe that's not optimal, but it's allowed, it's eligible. There is no problem.
Thank you, Julien. Let's go to the next one, which is about the pre-agreement. So should the pre-agreement to award the joint degree be already prepared and signed by each dean? Would the first draft of the agreement form be acceptable? So maybe I can shortly reply to this one. So of course, the pre-agreement to award a joint or multiple degree is needed at proposal stage, and for this you should use the template that is available in the proposal template on the call page. It should be prepared and signed by the official representative of your institution involved in the award of the joint or multiple degree. But we don't necessarily need a full agreement in place at proposal stage, so before the goal deadline. However, we highly encourage you to start the procedure and all the process early enough and early in advance, because this process takes a lot of time. We saw with the experience that we have with previous European joint doctorates that this full agreement may take some months, sometimes some years to put in place. So we highly encourage you to really start the process as early as possible. The next question is about more about implementation, I would say. What evidence is required to prove the compliance with the mobility rule of the doctoral candidates? So regarding implementation, I'm looking at Michaela. Would you like to take it?
Yes, of course. Okay, so actually the compliance with the mobility rule and the eligibility rule is actually the responsibility of the beneficiary. And of course, you will need to prove, in case of an audit, that the fellow was indeed eligible and that he respected the mobility rule. And for that, you can keep any type of documents. I mean, the CV, the places of residence, the passports, the bills from electricity bills. I mean, whatever can prove that the fellow did not reside in the country of the recruiting beneficiary. So anything is acceptable as long as you can prove it. And you should, of course, keep the documents in place in case of an audit.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. So hope it clarified fully your question. So the next one is about the consortium composition. Is it possible to have a consortium with 3 EU member states and 1 third country? So who would like to take this question? Julien? Yeah?
Yes, I can take this one. So short answer is yes. I mean, basically you have the minimum eligibility condition. So 3 different entities from 3 different member states or associated countries, of which 1 member state. So according to this sentence, 3 EU member states, I mean, if there are different EU member states, obviously, that's fine. And on top of that, you could have 1 third country participating. So either as beneficiaries and entitled to funding if it's a low or middle income country. So for this updated list, I advise you to go to the program guide that you can find in the funding and tender portal. So you will see a list of countries that are automatically eligible for funding. If the country is not on that list, it means they're not. I also advise you to always go to the funding and tender and get the latest version of the guide, of the program guide, and not just download it locally, because you might not have the updated version. And of course, as associated partner, it's always possible from any country in the world.
Very clear. Thank you, Julien. So the next question in Slido is about the letter of commitment again. Since no letter of commitment is required for associated partners, what if we need to add an associated partner to the consortium later on during the project? How do we do this? So this is again for implementation. Who would like to take this question? Yes? Okay, Michaela.
Okay, so no letter of commitment will be required, of course, even during implementation, but of course you will need to notify the research executive agency and of course the project officer who is in charge of your project. And the big difference you will see in the system if your proposal is selected for funding is that you also have to encode in the system all the associated partners which are taking part in the project. And this is normally done via an amendment. Of course, if there are a lot of modifications and many associated partners are added during the project implementation, we will concentrate the amendment at a later stage and include all of them. But what is really important to bear in mind is that you immediately need to inform us, and we will also assess the added value of adding an associated partner.
Thanks a lot, super clear. Let's go now to the next question about industrial doctorate this time. So is it possible to have only academic beneficiaries recruiting all fellows in industrial doctorates? Who would like to take this question? Eleni, yeah?
Yes, it is possible to have only academic beneficiaries recruiting all fellows, because you do have the flexibility now for the non-academic sector to participate either as a beneficiary or an associated partner. So since you have this flexibility, and you do have the requirement in the industrial doctorates that the fellows must spend minimum 50% of their time at the non-academic sector, this would be possible, what you're proposing, to only have academic beneficiaries recruiting all the fellows, as long as you have the non-academic sector participating as associated partners in order for the fellows to be able to spend 50% of their time there.
Thanks a lot, Eleni. So let's go now to the next question. How about fourth year of PhD in the case of a standard DN? In countries where PhD duration is rather 4 years, can a fourth year be added? I assume self-funded, but should the project described in the DN include this extra year? Thank you. So who would like to answer this question? Julien? Yeah?
I could take that. So indeed, in some countries, the PhD duration, the mandatory PhD duration is 4 years. And in those cases, yes, you would need to find extra sources of funding to fund for the fourth year of the doctoral candidate. Now, you don't need to explain that. It's welcome, but you don't need to explain that in your proposal. To remember that the enrollment to a PhD is mandatory, but the successful completion of the PhD is that obtaining the PhD is not a requirement. So obviously, we sincerely hope that all of the doctoral candidates will get their PhD, but this is not a mandatory element. So you don't have to describe it, but we strongly encourage you, of course, to find ways to fund the fourth year of this fellow.
Thanks a lot, Julien. So now the question is about the size of the consortium. So what is the expected size of the consortium, with how many beneficiaries from the non-academic sector, if the project is recruiting 15 PhD students, a classical or standard doctoral network? So who would like to answer this question among my colleagues? Julien again? Yes? Okay.
I mean, we do not expect any particular size of consortium. It has to make sense. So what you propose in your proposal has to make sense. So it has to make sense with the capacity that each entity has to supervise and host the fellows. So obviously, if you have the minimum of 3 entities recruiting 5 fellows, you need to be able, each entity has to be able to properly host and supervise 5 fellows at the same time. That would be a maximum of 15 beneficiaries, obviously, because all of them have to recruit. But there's no expectations from our side, and there is no element of evaluation that would go for a small size or a large size. And that goes again for the non-academic sector. It depends on the scope of your proposal. So if you have a very strong focus on the non-academic sector, it should be reflected by the number of entities from the non-academic sector, beneficiary or associated partner. Because if you had very few of them with very strong focus on the industry, that would look unbalanced. But it's basically, it depends on your project and it depends on you. We don't have any preferences.
Thank you, Julien. So In a word, you have a lot of flexibility on this, and it all depends on your research project that you would like to build. So the next question is about the industry beneficiary. So must they have their own doctoral candidates? So this is a bit a vague question, I would say. So we don't know if it refers to industrial doctorates or not, but who would like to maybe try to answer this question?
I can try.
Eleni? Yeah.
Okay. So if by industry beneficiary they're referring to the non-academic sector, I guess. Okay. So the non-academic beneficiaries, yes, they can have their own doctoral candidates in the way that they can recruit. As a beneficiary, whether you are from the academic or the non-academic sector, you must recruit at least one doctoral candidate. So yes, you do have, in a way, your own doctoral candidates because you have to recruit them, host them, and supervise them as a beneficiary. It is mandatory.
In case there is a follow-up question, do not hesitate to submit them through Slido, and we can answer them after the event as well. So the next one is, if I well understand, only beneficiaries have to be included in the Part A online form, so no need of PIC, so a participant identification code from partner organization. Is that correct? So I think you may go back to the recording after the event to also look at this, since it's quite the opposite. And who would like to clarify maybe for this potential applicant? Julien? Or?
I could. Yeah. Well, basically, the answer is straightforward. So no, that's not correct. All the consortium entities have to be in Part A. So beneficiaries and associated partners, all of them. So especially now that the associated partners don't provide a letter of commitment, they should be in there somewhere. So they have to be in Part A. And you will see in Part A, when you add the consortium participants, you can select partner or associated partner. Now, just a word, legalistically, semantically, beneficiaries in the submission forms are called partners, and associated partners are called associated partners. So we use the word beneficiary, but strictly speaking, you become beneficiary when the grant is running, and before that you are partners. So don't get confused by that. But they all need to be in Part A, yes.
But maybe regarding the participant identification code, if you could.
Yes. So all the associated partners need to have a PIC, so they need to register to get a PIC. Now the PIC does not need to be validated at the proposal stage. So just to make a long story short, applicants, they have to request a PIC and submit all kinds of documents so that they are validated by our services. So as to know what type of organizations they are, academic, non-academic, higher education establishments, and so on. And this process can take a bit of time, but they get a temporary PIC as soon as they request it. So they don't need to wait for the validation in order to submit a proposal. Now, don't leave that to the last moment, obviously, but this should not impede their participation in a proposal.
Yes, and as an associated partner, they don't need to be validated as well. But it's important to have one in the Form A of the proposals. The next question now is about what is the difference, I would say, between associated partner and associated partner linked to a beneficiary. Who would like to take this one? Michaela? Yes?
Yes, I can try actually to reply to this question. So as Julien said in the beginning of his presentation, I mean, associated partners can be included in the consortium. They don't sign the grant agreement, but they can actually host and provide training to the doctoral candidates who are recruited by the beneficiaries. Now, associated partners linked to a beneficiary can do the same thing. The main difference between both is that there is a link between the beneficiary, let's say it's a company X, and they have, I don't know, a subsidy in another country, which is company Z. And those two companies are legally linked, and this linked is pre-existing actually the proposal, the date of the submission of the proposal, let's put it that way. And it's not actually created only for the purposes of the action. And so because there is a legal link, this legal link needs to be declared to us. But in terms of their role in the project is very similar to the role of associated partners.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. So let's have another question now through Slido. So what if a participant does not have a gender equality plan in place before the call deadline? Does it have an impact on the evaluation? So who would like to take this question? Eleni? Yeah.
Under Horizon Europe, it is mandatory to have a gender equality plan. It is mandatory for specific entities, not for all. However, you don't need to have it in place before the call deadline because it is just a requirement. We do not evaluate it. We do not take it part. It's not part of the evaluation award criteria. However, before the time of the signature of your grant agreement, you will need to have it in place if you belong to the group of entities that need to have it in place.
Thanks a lot, Eleni. So let's go now to another question. So which organizations qualify as host organization? Non-profit, public organization, startups? I think we may need some more clarification about this question, unless my colleagues would like to give already some answers.
I don't know.
Yes?
I mean,
Julian?
basically, any organization, I mean, we don't have a qualification of host organizations. Any organization, any legal entity can be a host organization, so non-profit, public organization, startups. Of course, in the proposal, you also have to explain your capacity to host doctoral candidates and to supervise them. So if that's the meaning of your question, yes, to qualify as a host, you have to show that you can properly host and supervise fellows in your own premises. That's a given. That's mandatory. But we do not have any other qualification for hosts.
Thanks a lot, Julien. Hope it clarifies your question. So let's move on to another question. So it is encouraged to the participation of organizations from third countries. There is a list of third countries eligible for funding, such as Madagascar. For the budget, what correction rate you apply to the living allowance they host students? So this is a very long question. Who would like to help me answer it? Julien again?
I could take it, yes. Yes, basically, so in the case of Madagascar, for instance, so they could participate as a beneficiary if they are eligible according to the program guide, and I believe they are. So they can be beneficiary, receive funding. Now for the country correction coefficient, I have to say I don't know it by heart for Madagascar, but it will be, I mean, it's basically a measure of the cost of living in the country. So this is defined in the work program, in an annex of the work program. If they are beneficiaries, they have to host students and supervise them in their own premises. If they are associated partners, because from the question, I understand it's beneficiary because you talk about correction rate. So if they are associated partners, they don't need to host them, but if they are beneficiaries, they should host the fellow. One thing that's important for you to know is that the fellows, so let's say there's a beneficiary from Madagascar, recruiting and hosting a fellow, this fellow needs to be enrolled in a PhD degree from an EU member state or associated country. And that's a bit the difficulty of it, meaning that this fellow will need to be enrolled in a PhD outside of Madagascar. So that's the trick.
Or to have a double degree, one in Madagascar and another one.
Or to have a double degree,
Yes.
yes, because it says enrolled in a PhD from a member state or associated country. It could be a double degree of which one of those is from the, yes, that's possible.
As long
Thank
as
you.
one fulfills the requirement, yes.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question about industrial doctorates this time. So industries that participate in the training program, 18 mandatory months for each PhD student, should join as beneficiaries or associated partners. So it's again the opportunity to remind the rules for industrial doctorates and the requirements. So who would like to take this question? Michaela? No? Or Eleni? Yes?
I'm trying to understand the question. Give me a
Okay.
minute.
No, I can
Industries
take the question, no
participate in the
problem.
training program.
I can take it.
Yeah, actually,
okay.
so it was partially answered by Eleni, that's why I actually mentioned this. So industries actually can participate in the training program. And as we said before, the non-academic sector can participate either as a beneficiary or an associated partner. It's up to you to find the best formula. What we want to see is that the 50% rule and exposure to the non-academic sector is actually complied with. This is the most important. So there is this flexibility now in the DN call.
Thanks a lot, Michaela, for this clarification. And maybe just to mention that the minimum 50% in the non-academic sector is a minimum. So meaning that we could also have a fellow recruited 100% of his fellowship in the non-academic sector. Yes. Okay, so let's move on now to the next question. So since the rules change for standard DN from 10 to 15 individual projects, I suppose, is there a penalty associated with having fewer than 15 projects? So maybe I can shortly reply to this one. So of course not. Of course, this is always a maximum that we give you, but you don't need to use the maximum number of person months. And we can see indeed also over the years under H2020 with innovative training networks, or also with the first doctoral networks call under Horizon Europe, that you are not all using the maximum number of person months and the maximum size of the consortia. You should adjust it according to your proposal. And if you don't need to recruit 15 doctoral candidates in your project, if you want a smaller project, this is also fully acceptable. And we have a bit of everything now in our portfolio.
Yes, maybe just to add to this, we've had project funded with a smaller number of fellows, with a bigger number of fellows. We also have projects that have been funded without any associated partners, some with a lot of associated partners. Mm-hmm. So there is no guidelines, there is no rule of thumb that says that you need to have the biggest project possible or the smallest or a lot of associated partners or none. We don't have any preference, and this is reflected in the fact that many projects have been funded that are of different size and shapes and number of associated partners.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Julien. What is important is also to keep in mind to have something feasible and implementable as well. So it should stay also of a reasonable size. And in particular for industrial doctorates, for example, we saw that sometimes smaller consortia are easier to manage and implement than large ones. So let's get now another question, which is about to suppose that a student is supervised by an industry and an academic entity, which is not a university. So, for example, a public research organization, who is going to provide the PhD title in a doctoral network, industrial doctorates. So who would like to answer? Eleni?
I can answer. Remember, there is this requirement that all the doctoral candidates, they have to be registered to a PhD program. So whether it is an industrial doctorate or a standard doctorate, remember, your doctoral candidates have to be registered in a PhD program, and it has to be located. This program has to be either in an EU member state or an associated country. So in this case, you have foreseen supervision by the industry, by the non-academic sector, and by an academic entity which is not a university. You have foreseen for that, for public research organization. But you need to remember that you also need to register that doctoral candidate to a PhD in an EU member state or associated country. So that's where the PhD title will come. Unless there is a grouping, there is a specific agreement between this public research organization and the university that would be providing the PhD. So you might have that as well.
Maybe we could add that you can have an associated partner providing the PhD.
Yes.
In this sort of setting. And some associated partners are just inside to provide the PhD degree, and that's absolutely fine.
Yes. Thanks a lot for all these answers, Eleni and Julien. So the next question is about a limit. Is there any limit on the time that a recruited fellow can spend in secondments to an associated partner? Who would like to answer this question? Michael? Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. So actually, there is only a limit for doctoral networks for the standard ones, but there is absolutely no limit for the industrial doctorate and the joint doctorate. So if we go back to the doctoral, to the standard doctoral networks, the limit is 1/3 of the fellowship duration.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. Very clear. Let's now have another question, again about joint doctorates. So we hope to see many proposals submitted as a joint doctorate then for the 23 call. So do PhDs have to be enrolled at both universities during the entire employment, or is it shorter enrollment also possible? So who would like to answer this question? I can.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, I will try to answer it then. So here it's not again, it's not a full recipe that we can give you. It all depends on the type of agreement that you will need with the both institution that will award the joint or double or multiple degree. So for example, if between two universities, one is requiring the fellow to spend a year at their premises or at their PhD program, then you will have to foresee it in your proposal. But it really depends. Sometimes in joint doctorates, the fellow doesn't need to be physically present in the second university. So it really depends on the type of agreement that you will put in place between the entities for the award of the joint, double, or multiple degree.
And joint degree.
Yeah. Indeed. So the next question is about if the application is for a joint doctoral network, all the candidates will need to be part of a joint doctoral network, or some of them can have a regular PhD. Thanks a lot for this very interesting question. This is an important one, especially for doctoral networks on the Horizon Europe. So who would like to answer it? Julien? Yeah?
I could take that. So the simple answer is no. In a joint doctoral networks, all the fellows, each and every one of them has to be enrolled in a joint, double, or multiple degree. It's not possible to have a mix and match of regular degrees and joint degrees. Now, of course, it's also an opportunity to tell you that you can also have standard doctoral networks with some fellows enrolled in a joint, double, or multiple degree. The same way that you can have a standard doctoral network with a very strong industrial component. That's possible. Of course, check the eligibility for each modality, because then in that case, say you want to have a very strong industrial component in a standard doctoral networks, you would be limited with the secondment limitation of 1/3, that you're not limited in the industrial doctorate. But so short answer is no, you cannot have it. They all have to be in a joint degree.
Thanks a lot, Julien, for this very clear answer. Of course, do not hesitate to submit any additional question you may have. We'll try to answer most of them. We still have a few minutes to do that. So let's move on now to the next question about industrial doctorate. So can a doctoral candidate enrolled in a university spend the 50% of her or his time, 18 months, in a secondment to the same non-academic associated partner? So who would like to answer this question? Michaela? Yeah?
I will answer that question. Thank you, Audrey. So since actually there is no secondment limitation in an ID proposal, it means that a doctoral candidate enrolled in a university can spend 50% of his time in a secondment, in a partner, in a non-academic associated partner.
Thanks a lot, Michaela, indeed. So the next question is about Australian universities. So can they host PhD students? If not the primary supervision, are secondment a possibility? So who would like to answer this one?
I could.
Yes, Julien?
We need to double check, but I'm pretty sure Australia is part of the high income countries that would not be.
Yes, it is. I can confirm, yes.
Yeah. And it's not associated to Horizon Europe, so they could be beneficiary if they make a case strong enough to get exceptional funding. Otherwise, they can be associated partners. So they could participate in a project, and you could have fellows seconded into Australia. I'd be interested to be a PhD students in your project then. Secondments are a possibility, and if you manage to be a beneficiary, you could also recruit a fellow. But again, with the same caveat as before, is that the fellow should be enrolled in a PhD in a member state or an EU or a Horizon Europe associated country.
Thanks a lot, Julien. Just also to keep in mind that secondments and long secondments of more than 6 months should be covered with the EU project funds. So meaning that, you maybe also need to double check in terms of expenses and costs if it's feasible within the project as well. Let's move on now to the next question. So about joint doctoral network again, do all candidates have to have the same type of joint or double or multiple, or can this vary from fellow to fellow, some doubles, some joints? So for this one, Michaela, yes, you would like to take it?
Yeah, I can take it. So, we offer you a lot of flexibility, so it's really up to you. You can actually have joint, double, or multiples. Up to you to decide. And of course, as Julien said many times, choose the best option for your project, for the needs of your projects, and also for your fellows.
It's also important to mention that we don't have any preferences, and when the expert evaluator assess your proposals, they receive the instruction that we don't have any preferences, so they don't favor any type of joint or double or multiple degree. The next question now is about industrial doctorates, and we partially covered it, but still, is it allowed to have small industrial doctorates consortia? Who would like to take this one? Julien? Yes?
I could take it. So yes, it's as long as you abide with the minimum eligibility conditions. So you should be at least 3 beneficiaries from 3 different member states or associated countries, of which at least 1 member state. You can have a small ID consortium. The smallest you can have is 3, basically, and the maximum number of person months is 540. So this is absolutely possible, and there is no preference for large or small consortia. It really depends on what you want to do and whether you are appropriately sized for the scope of the project that you want to implement, basically. Just if you are referring to the H2020 EID projects that could have just 2 beneficiaries, that's not possible any number under Horizon Europe. It's minimum 3.
Okay, just maybe to complement on this one, and based on the experience that we have with the DN21 and 22 calls, we have many small consortia also for industrial doctorates, so which means that you are using the full range of different project size, especially in the industrial doctorates. So indeed, as you are not, it's not mandatory to go for the maximum size of the consortia. So I think we may have a few more questions, but in case you would like to submit some more, please do not forget to go to Slido, and we can move on now to this next questions about industrial doctorates again. Can non-academic partners who are not recruiting be inserted as zero-budget beneficiaries? So who would like to take it? Eleni?
Yeah? Yes, it's very short. The answer is very short. No, if you are a beneficiary, you have to recruit. This is the requirement. If you are a beneficiary, you have to recruit at least minimum one doctoral candidate. You have to host, you have to supervise. It doesn't, this is a requirement that you cannot go around it.
Thank you, Eleni. Just maybe to complement on this, so when you will insert, I mean, at the proposal stage in your form part A, in the submission system, you will see also a warning message indicating that as beneficiary, you should recruit at least one fellow. So now we have another questions about Canada. So how Canada can be a partner, and with which role? I know that Julien, you have been to Canada very often lately, so maybe you want to take this question.
Sure, I can take it. So basically, Canada can be a partner in the same way that Australia can be a partner. So Canada is a high-income third country. They're not associated to Horizon Europe. So they can be an associated partner in the consortium. There is no problem about that. They can host the governments. They can provide training. They can also try to be beneficiary, but then again, if they are beneficiaries, they should recruit and they should request funding. And this funding can be only exceptionally granted if their participation is essential to the project, in the same manner I described before, for instance, access to a database or to a specific know-how that only they have. Remember that if they are a beneficiary and if they are granted exceptional funding and they recruit a fellow, this fellow would still need to be enrolled in a PhD from an EU member state or an associated country. So just bear that in mind when you make up your proposal.
Thank you, Julien. Maybe just to complement it, in case they don't receive exceptional funding, then they can still be in the consortium, but participating with their own funding. So this is also a possibility. The next question is, it was mentioned that budgets are earmarked to disciplines, so scientific panels. In what way is the budget divided over the disciplines? So maybe you missed it during Julien's explanation. Who would like to take it? Eleni?
I can take it. I
Yes?
also had a frequently asked question about it. So for all doctoral networks proposals, including the joint doctorates and the industrial doctorates, proposals are allocated under these 8 scientific panels. So the budget that is allocated to each scientific panel depends on the number of proposals, eligible proposals that are submitted to this panel. So there is a proportional relationship between the two. This is the way we allocate the budget. It depends on the number of proposals submitted to each budget. To each panel, I'm sorry.
To each panel.
To each panel.
Thank you, Eleni. So usually, to give you an idea, we have different size and we have some trends among the scientific panels. So the biggest one is in general, since the last 4 or 5 years, engineering panel.
And life.
Life panel is also one of the biggest. And then followed by medium-sized panels, environment, chemistry, social sciences, physics, and then smaller size panel such as mathematics and economics. So let's have another question now. Our university deploys only doctoral program of 4 years. Since the time limit for fellowship is 3 years, is it eligible? So who would like to take this question? Michaela? Yes?
I can take the question. Thank you, Audrey. So, of course, actually, you are eligible to participate. Of course, if you participate in a doctoral network, the maximum fellowship duration which we will fund is 36 months, which means that you will need to, or the fellow will need to find additional funding for his 4th year. But if you do participate in a joint doctorate, then actually the maximum fellowship duration which we fund is 48 months, so 4 years. So it's up to you to see, what could be the best type of action to apply to. But in terms of eligibility, of course, you are eligible.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. So let's move on now to the next question. Is there any age restriction while recruiting the doctoral candidates? This is a good question. Who would like to answer it? Julien, I see. Yeah?
This is a good question, but there is no age restriction while recruiting the doctoral candidate. Doctoral networks are all about the skills development of the fellows. And we have cases also of fellows that have done something different in their professional life before, and that want to start a PhD now, and that they are successfully, reorient their career to something else. So there is no age restriction. The only thing that matters is that they should not have a doctoral degree when they are recruited.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Julien. Do we have another question? Yes, we do. So, can a beneficiary recruit a doctoral candidate for only a part of the project with split recruitment, for example, 12 months out of 36 months? Who would like to answer this one? Julien? Yeah.
The answer is quite straightforward. Sure, why not? It's if it makes sense for your project, you can do that. Don't forget that, as Audrey mentioned before, 36 months is the maximum. So the minimum is 3. So that doesn't mean that the fellows need to have all fellows need to have a contract duration of 36 months. There are also cases in which the fellow is between different institutions and they have sometimes split recruitment, so 12 months in one and then 24 in another, or 12, 12, 12. This really depends on you. But yes, that's possible.
Thanks a lot, Julien. Then we have a few more questions, I think. So this one is about partner organizations. So we call them now associated partners. So are they mandatory, or can we also have a consortium made of only beneficiaries? So who would like to answer this one? Yes, Michaela?
Yes. So as we said before, actually there is no minimum number of associated partners. And of course, it is not mandatory to include them. It really depends on the needs of your project. So you can have a project with 0 associated partner or with many, up to you to decide.
Indeed. Thanks a lot, Michaela.
And we do have running projects with only beneficiaries. So
yes. We also do have projects with many associated partners or partner organizations, and I would not recommend to go to the maximum either, because it should stay and remain manageable as well. So keep it in mind. Do we have another question? Yes. So do the beneficiaries have to correspond to the main panel? For example, if I apply in mathematics scientific panel, do the beneficiary have to be all in the math departments? So who would like to clarify this answer? Julien?
I could take that one.
Mm-hmm.
No, basically, you have to choose a main panel. So you have to look at the MSCA descriptors to see what best fit your overall proposal, and that would guide the main panel, the panel in which you're going to submit your proposal. But a lot of proposals are multidisciplinary by nature. So you could have the main panel mathematics, and then with the following 2 or 4 additional descriptors, you could have descriptors from other disciplines. So what matters, of course, is that the proposal, the project you're going to put forward, that you're going to submit, you should have the beneficiaries that have the capacity to run the project that you propose. So I would assume that if it's a purely mathematic proposal, one would assume that the beneficiaries would be more mathematics beneficiaries. But it's not a monolithic thing. It's not because you submit it to the mathematics panel that it has to be strictly mathematics and all your beneficiaries should be mathematics.
Indeed. Thanks a lot, Julien. And I think this was the last question that we will answer live in Slido for today's session. Of course, we know that we have many more questions in Slido that we could not answer today and in live, but don't worry, we will answer them in writing after the event, and you will receive a proper answer to all your questions. So we are now at the end of this MSCA Doctoral Networks 23 Call Info event, and I would like to thank all of you again for your very active participation, also with the question and answers, but also with the polls and the quiz. I would like also to invite you to take a short satisfaction survey that is available in Slido, and it will stay available for the next hour or so. So please, it's important for us to receive your feedback and maybe how to further improve this type of event. And also to get your opinion and how it helps you also in preparing your proposal. Please also, I would like to reassure you that all the slides and the presentation that you saw today will be uploaded on the platform of the event, so you will have access to them shortly after the event. And before closing the session, I would like to remind you maybe about 5 last important tips that you can keep with you before leaving this info session event. So the 5 tips, and the first one is to read the guidance and all the templates and the guidance documents that we provide you and that are available on the call page. The second one is to follow the templates. Please use and follow the templates. The third one, quite important one, think about our evaluators, is write clearly your proposal. The fourth one is also crucial. It's submit on time, because if you don't submit on time, then we will not be able to evaluate your proposal. And finally, the fifth one, please perform a final check of your proposal even after submission. I highly encourage you to do it to avoid any unfortunate mistakes. So with that, I would like to thank you again. With my colleagues, we would like to thank you again for your participation, for your attention, and we wish all of you good luck and looking forward to see your proposals in November. Thanks a lot.